welcome to episode 117 of A Gamer Looks at 40. I'm Bill Tucker, and I know it's not Final Fantasy VII. I know it's been a few weeks since we've been on that train, but I've been recording interviews. My editors have been working tirelessly cutting these things up, and I promise you we will have some Final Fantasy VII coming your way very, very shortly. But in the meantime, I was looking at my list of things. I was looking through the old archives, and I noticed that I have a bunch of stuff in the side quests folder. Now, when my editors cut up the interviews and I'm putting things into their little buckets to make the full episodes, there are things that just don't fit anywhere. But rather than throw them away, because they're usually cool comments or interesting thoughts, I just put them into a bucket called side quests. And I have had 8 of these side quest episodes over the last few years. And this is Side Quest Volume 9, just a random collection of thoughts and introductions about a wide variety of topics. An omnibus, if you will, for this podcast. So starting us off on this episode is Wade, aka Prof Noctis, on Twitter and Twitch. He is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met and an excellent conversationalist. He is a professor of video games at the University of Alabama and just an all-around fascinating person to talk to about games. In this clip, we talk about how video games are amazing at creating first-person memories.
Well, and let me say this, and I mean, I don't know if this would go into a 15 podcast better, but my research talks about this. This is the reason why I use video games in my classrooms, because the research shows that your brain forms first-person memories when you're playing a video game. And anybody that's ever played a game gets this. And you can even talk to a kid literally today about what game they're playing and ask them what they did. And they will say, I saved the princess, not Mario saved the princess. And this is a subtle way that gives us a sign that our brains are processing that I did this, that it's a first-person memory because they have agency. And this is what makes video games unique from watching a movie and even reading a book, because it is a first-person memory. My research asked the question, can you channel that first-person memory to activate a third-person acquisition of knowledge? So as you're studying something in humanities, can you pair it with a first-person memory in a game so you can recall it? So that when Noctis goes through a cave, you remember the story of David going into a cave, King David, for example. Right. And the answer is yes. Long story short, again.
Wow. That's so fascinating. That's so interesting.
Cool? Yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, I have a 7-year-old son, and I'd much rather him play a game than watch a movie or a show, because again, you have that agency, and he makes those connections. And sometimes for negative too. My son had a situation, this is gonna be off topic, but that's fine. He was playing, he loves Pokemon. He's really into Pokemon, and he wanted the cards. Now he plays Pokemon cards, and we're teaching him the game, the whole thing. And he wanted to play Pokemon Shield, a Sword or Shield, one of the more modern ones. And he was playing, and he got, like anybody who's ever done an RPG has done, he got to a section of the game he was not supposed to be in and got completely wrecked and just got decimated. And it killed him. And he was genuinely upset, truly upset. And it was a good moment, like a teaching moment. Like, hey, this is happens when you lose, and this is, how to deal with losing. So just how I think, even because play is vitally important. And I know Red and I have talked about this a lot, and I'm sure you've probably as well. The idea, the concept of play is so important, even as adults. We don't do it enough, right? Because so much learning happens that way, and growth and everything else. So, no, dude, that's really cool, man. Any cool. Other? Yeah, go please.
I think we have so many stories like that. I mean, certainly when a difficulty spike or something like that decimates us and our character, and we feel that viscerally. I remember, again, I think I was 6, maybe 7 years old, playing on the regular Nintendo before I got my Super. Rent another rental. Like I'm sure you remember the days when we used to go on Friday nights, and like get a pizza at a rental game. Like those days are the best.
There's a whole episode of this show.
You know?
There's a whole episode of this show about rentals. If you want to listen back to it, where we just talk about rentals like with 10 different people. I
just have such nostalgia for those days because it was a family thing, but also it's like, let's try this game out, and like it just isn't the same. But anyway, I remember one particular game. You probably remember it. It is Princess Tomato and the Flower or the Vegetable Kingdom or something like that. Salad Kingdom.
I feel like I've had this conversation 3 times. Yes.
My gosh.
I've talked about this game. Yes.
Well, let me tell you, this game is like, it's an odd, like, kind of point click sort of adventure for the NES where you play as like a little tomato sprout, something or other. Anyway, the one thing I remember about this game, I've never played through it all the way. I don't even remember the story. I remember there is an angry green jalapeno character in a suit. And you get him mad, and he turns blazing fire red, okay? And he locks you in a room, and he raises water while he's watching you about to drown. And this horrified me. I had visions of like the devil and like the underworld, and I like went to my mom and dad, and I'm like sobbing. They're like, "Why are you afraid?" And I was like, "The devil's trying to get me." It's like...
The devil is a jalapeno. Don't you understand?
The devil is a jalapeno. There was fire. I was like, oh my gosh. They took the game away from me. They took it back, and I never played it again. I still have this like visceral memory of it.
Oh, totally. I remember Fester's Quest. I remember getting that as a gift. And I remember, do you remember, people don't remember Fester's Quest, this piece of it. If you dilly-dallied on the screen too much, this horrifying spider would start stalking you from the bottom or the top, or forget which direction. I could not play that game. Still, I would have bad memories of that spider. Terrifying.
Horrifying. To this day, like I think that, what is it, Resident Evil 3 with the Nemesis system, maybe Resident Evil 2 as well, where something's constantly chasing you, it conjures that PTSD in me of like that spider in Fester's Quest coming after you. So I can't do it.
No. And that kind of links back to what we were talking about with Final Fantasy IV in that it's those formative experiences really do connect, right? And they linger and last, and that's really cool. Coming up next are brand new friends of the show, Matt and Geoff of the Fun and Games podcast. I interviewed them a couple of weeks ago as of this recording for Final Fantasy VII, and it was an amazing conversation. We got into personal thoughts. We had a lot of fun, laughed a ton. I cannot wait to share those clips with you over the next couple of months as we kind of lead into the holiday season. But I wanted to give you guys a quick introduction as to what they're all about, what they do on their show, and give you an opportunity to meet them before you hear them on the full Final Fantasy VII podcast. So without further ado, here's Matt and Geoff from the Fun and Games podcast introducing themselves and their show. All right. Well, guys, thanks so much for taking time to chat with me a bit about Final Fantasy VII and maybe more if we get to it. Who knows? Who knows where the conversation goes? But Geoff, Matt, I'd love for you to start out a bit by telling those who don't know you what y'all do on your podcast and what y'all do online.
Sure. Geoff, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, outside of podcasting, I am a voice actor, musician, and in the podcasting world, in the video game world, and why Matt and I are here right now is we both produce Fun and Games podcast, which is a video game conversation podcast with an optimistic view of gaming, coming from the idea that every game is somebody's favorite and nobody can play every game that's out there. So we bring our gaming history into our present and future. And so we like to talk with people in and around the industry about all sorts of big and small developments, champion indie gaming, and just generally engage and enjoy this hobby, this media, and bring who we are to all y'all and hope to hear back from everyone else. And we also do another show on our feed, but Matt's the better one to talk to about that.
Thank you, Geoff. Yeah, so Side Quests is a series that I brainchilded. That's a word, sure. I was tired of the negativity on the internet. I think the inspiration of the series Side Quests was I saw a screenshot from Paper Mario Origami King, and people were mad about it, even though they knew nothing about the game. And it was frustrating to me that people were being so negative on a game that had no info on it yet. And so with that, I was like, well, I'm going to create a series where a different host every episode can come on and talk about a game they love and why they love it. And that's how SideQuest was born. I did the debut episode on Control because I just played it and was obsessed. And the series ethos is along the lines of what Geoff had said, which is, every game is somebody's favorite. Good, bad, doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Everyone has a favorite game. And we wanted to be able to tell those stories, and not just for podcasters like us, but fans of the show, actors, comedians, musicians, literally anybody who wanted to tell their story. And we've done, as of we're recording today, over 333 episodes. And then for every 50 episode, we do a milestone episode where me, Geoff, and a guest are joined for a longer form version of it where we roundtable talk about a game we love and why we love it. We've done Super Mario World, Shovel Knight, Chrono Trigger, and had some incredible guests for that as well. And it's just another way for us to share in what we love and bring the audience into the conversation, because every episode we say, we thank our listeners for being a part of the conversation, because it is a conversation. And it's not the shows that we do, your show too, it's nothing without the audience and the fans who want to engage in that dialogue, because that's the best thing about games, is talking about it. And so, yeah. And as for me, I am also a producer on the show. I also host another podcast called Reignite, which started as a Mass Effect podcast, is now a Dragon Age podcast. And for the history of the show, we're actually current with production of games at BioWare, because they're putting out a new Dragon Age as of when we're recording, and that's exciting. It's me and my co-host Frankie Bradley Lestrange. We put ourselves in the shoes of Shepard and then discuss why we made those choices. We did it then for Ryder in Andromeda, and now we're doing it. We did it for the Warden, who can have any name, and now Hawk, as we are playing through Dragon Age 2 currently. And that's more about why we make the choices we make, the decision making in games, and most importantly, why we romance who we romance in those games, because that's really what we want to talk about. And so that's been a lot of fun. I've been producing that series and co-hosting it for a long time. And then I'm also a DJ in my downtime. I stream a little, and I think that's everything. So yeah,
that's awesome. I love SideQuest, because just like you said, I've been wanting to do a SideQuest for a while. Every once in a while, I look on my pod feed and I'm like, damn, SideQuest, I need to do a SideQuest thing, because I know you just accept not anybody, but really it feels like a door is open, come and tell your story type of situation. And I love that about that, because that's how this show is too. I'm very much so, hey, you don't need to be a podcaster, you don't need to be an expert, just you have a cool story to tell about a game you love, come on over. And I love when other shows do that, because you're right, the conversation is what kind of elevates gaming to the levels, quote unquote, of other types of art forms. Like, you can have really cool conversations. So I love it, man. You guys do awesome stuff.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm happy to have you do an episode anytime. We have a running list of stuff that's taken, because not everything in the feed. We have stuff beyond that. Just reach out after this and we'll get you set up. There are a few Final Fantasies unclaimed, just saying, just throwing that out there.
Okay.
All
right. I'm still playing 9 for the first time right now, so in preparation for this series. So and enjoying it. I am really liking. I tried to play 8. I gave it 3 hours. I gave it 3 hours of dad time, and that was the best I could give it. Next up, we have Josh of the Still Loading podcast talking about the joy of conventions. Now, if you've never listened to the Still Loading podcast, they are an absolutely fantastic retro gaming show. They talk about games of all types. I had the great honor, honestly, truly great honor, to be a part of their Final Fantasy Draft 2024 this past, I think it was released a couple of months ago. If you haven't listened to that episode, myself and 3 other people attempt to cobble together the ultimate Final Fantasy in an NFL/NHL style draft. And it was a ton of fun, really good people on that show. And I did not win. As a matter of fact, I lost pretty big when it came to the final voting, but it doesn't matter. It was still a great time. I don't know. I thought that's the kind of Final Fantasy I wanted to make. Evidently, others didn't agree. But what I can agree on is that Josh is an amazing person to talk to about games, and I'm so grateful he was able to join me for this podcast. So let's chat with Josh as we talk about video game conventions and all the nostalgia feels.
Video game conventions are just churches for gamers.
I like that. I like that.
I mean, that's what it is. Like I'm without going into anything for myself, I always feel weird saying this because I never want people to think that I'm pushing anything on them, but I am a Christian, but I'm not like not a nuts one, just to be clear. But
It's fair. It's fine.
One of the things that they talk about with church is that it's supposed to be communal. The reason why you meet every week is to be around like-minded people. That's what conventions are. And it kind of in a lesser sense, what the Final Fantasy games kind of bring, where everyone's meeting around this thing and you're communing over Final Fantasy. I don't know. I think that's I'm not trying to compare Final Fantasy to a religion, especially since Final Fantasy kills God a lot of times, but
Constantly killing God. Yes.
All the time. But it is something where I think it's an interesting thing. I think it's just that. I think that kind of like, I think the TV show analogy I gave before is probably the best one. Like you all meet up the next day, like, oh, what did you see? How far did you get?
I like that concept. And I like the fact that we create communities around things we love. Like when I go to video game conventions, I often make the joke, I don't know why I'm there because I don't collect anything. I'm not buying anything. I like cosplay. I don't cosplay myself, but I find it interesting and fun and cool. And then I always land on, I like being around the people. I like being around like-minded people, talk to people about video games, check out some games, play some games, and being around like-minded people is a good thing. And I'm also a Christian, so and I'm not a crazy one as well. So you're in a safe place in that regard. You're right. Community the idea is that it's supposed to be a group of people, like-minded people sharing experience. And that is it's a very interesting piece of it. So I like how you're kind of connecting those dots between the playground experience and these games that are intended to be solo, but really don't, because you connect with them so much, you want to share it. Just like that TV show. And just like Twitch or a podcast. Yeah. I love when there's somebody right now I found on Twitter, they're going to run through what became of Edith Finch for the first time. I can't wait to watch that stream because it'd be so fun experiencing that with somebody who's never played that game before. How fun is that, right? Like, I love that kind of stuff. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and that definitely does link up. Next up, we reunite with Carson, who was heavily featured on the earlier Final Fantasy episodes. I don't believe I have any clips from him for Final Fantasy VII, which is a shame because he was such a fun conversation to have, had a lot of great insights. In this clip, we talk about Final Fantasy, of course, but also the games we were playing other than that, and how much of a departure it was to experience this sprawling NES RPG. So so you're talking about the first Final Fantasy, the original NES.
Yes, the original
Gotcha.
NES.
So did you find yourself confused? I played it when I was 8. I'm 43 now, so I was 8 when I first played the first Final Fantasy on NES. And 7 or 8, probably 7. That sounds about right, just age-wise. So, were you able to get through it? Do you remember how far you got?
No. I think I have vivid memories of getting to at least Matoya's cave.
Okay.
And then stopping, getting to hear that music and all that was, I think, the biggest thing about Final Fantasy in general to me is the music.
Oh, absolutely. That music, I cannot get through an initial conversation without talking about the music. And we'll talk about it because I definitely want to get your take on it and spend some time. But just on the initial interviews, we may have to just do an episode just on the music, but we'll see. We'll see how it, because seriously, it's ridiculous because it's so important and tentpole.
Well, Monster is a big part of the music, but I think there are some little composers hidden in between the Final Fantasy games that really deserve recognition now, like Soken for Final Fantasy 14 and a bunch of others.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of contributors, and we'll talk about the music because I definitely want to just make that its own section. But going back to the original Final Fantasy, do you remember how it felt as a child, like exploring that world? What were you playing at the time, and was this drastically different than anything you had seen before?
I'd say fairly different. I think the games I played back in the day, on my NES, I had I had the Bigfoot video game for the NES, and
Nice.
and I had a RC Pro-Am, definitely Mario and Mario 2 and Mario 3 and those games.
And when you say Bigfoot, you mean Bigfoot the monster truck, right? Yes.
Bigfoot
I
the
remember
monster truck.
that game. I remember the Bigfoot the monster truck game. Why do I remember that? You just awoke a memory in my head that I didn't know existed. It's so strange.
Back in the day, I was a big monster truck fan, watching rallies on TV and everything, like having little toys and whatnot, and watching. There was this show called The Power Team. It was an old animated show about video game.
Power Team.
Which was basically, it had Bigfoot, the guy from Narc, and some red tomato dude, and a basketball player and a barbarian.
What is happening? I'm looking at a screenshot of this madness, of this absolute madness. Yes, it's got a basketball player, a tomato, anthropomorphic tomato, some sort of standard army dude, and a barbarian. Yes. That is weird.
Yeah, that army dude / police guy is from the video game Narc.
Okay,
the arcade
from
game,
Narc.
the computer.
Wow, so it's Max Force. I'm looking at it now online. It's Max Force from Narc, Kuros from the Wizards and Warriors series, Quirk from that's Quirk. Okay, yeah, the tomato, and Tyrone from Arch Rivals, and then Bigfoot from the game of the same name, based on the famous monster truck Bigfoot. That is so funny.
Yeah.
That's
sorry to diverge that and tangent that.
That's fine. Listen, this is a rabbit hole that may need to be descended upon at some point. Because boy, that is adjacent. I asked Mike. Like, hey Mike, do you want to do an episode on on the Power Team, whatever it's called? That's so funny.
I think I have over the time I've owned at least one of the major consoles. Like I've never had TurboGrafx or a 3DO or stuff like that, but I've had a PlayStation, I've had a Saturn, I've had a GameCube, N64, and all that.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I had to pick a fork in that road, and I took the N64 fork, and I don't. As someone who enjoyed RPGs, that's definitely the wrong road to take. But
yeah. I assume you had to deal with Quest 64.
I never played it. I never dared. I think in my back of my mind, I was always like, one day Square will make something for the N64. I promise. I don't need to play Quest 64. I think I knew enough from other people talking, and because I was 17, so I was probably reading reviews a lot at the time anyway and whatnot. So.
That was when they were on a split with Sony after the Nintendo PlayStation and the Philips CDI and whatnot.
Yep.
That debacle.
Yeah, that whole disaster, exactly right. Coming up next is James and JJ of the RetroFits YouTube channel. Both of these guys have been on the show before. You heard them in early Final Fantasy episodes, and you will continue hearing them as this show evolves and progresses through the series. But I love when two friends just get together and have fun. And James and JJ are always having an absolute blast on their channel, whether they're playing Quest 64 or making up silly voices or just being themselves. Is a real treat to listen to and watch. So let's hear a little bit about what they do online, what their show is about, and learn more about James and JJ. James, thank you guys so much for coming on, taking time out of your Saturday to join me to talk about Final Fantasy. I've said the word Final Fantasy too many times already in these series of interviews, but it's a series that warrants a big discussion, right? So James, JJ, I'd love to hear first from, just what do you guys do online, a little bit about yourselves, and maybe your first touch point with the Final Fantasy series as a whole.
Sure. Our channel is called RetroFits. We mostly do older games, but we've kind of gotten to the point where we just do whatever we want. and we basically just play through and give funny voices to characters that don't have voice acting.
It's very free flow, unscripted entertainment, except for the fact that we're usually reading lines from the script, if that makes any sense.
Well, we kind of improvise if the dialogue is stupid.
Yeah, but I mean, it's mostly about getting that feeling back from, not even couch multiplayer, just being on the couch with your friends, like playing cool games and hanging out and talking and that kind of stuff that we feel like we had, like, even as recently as like 2012, 2013, before online gaming became the absolute norm.
Right. I love that. And do you guys normally stick with retro games, and any particular style of game do you guys do, or are you all over the map?
A little over the map, but we both kind of lean towards RPGs.
Yeah, well,
which makes sense.
It's our favorite general genre, especially in the older games. I mean, we break away a little bit. I think we played Medieval on one set of episodes. That was really fun. I'm trying to think of another. Well, we played the Resident Evil 4, not the remake, the HD remaster, so that we could do what we called a fun run, where we put Ashley in the armor and just ran around with the Chicago typewriter for 20 episodes to try and beat the game in the funniest way possible.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. But we started off actually with JJ and my collective favorite games, which were Suikoden and Suikoden 2.
Oh, cool.
Those were really, really big for us when they first came out, and it's actually how we met.
Oh, cool.
It's yeah.
I had a costume for the first main character of the game, and he was the only person at the anime convention that we were at that recognized my costume.
The convention itself was actually in Dallas. It was A-Kon. It was one of the largest anime conventions in the U.S., and nobody recognized you.
That's so funny.
That was crazy to me when you were like, "You're the first person who got it right." No, that can't possibly be true, but it was.
That's so good.
I mean, to be fair, it is a little bit of an obscure game.
It is, but when you're at an anime convention, you would think you'd more than one. Next up on the podcast, we have Kyle from the RPG Show talking about D&D, Final Fantasy, Legos, and GameFAQs message boards. We cover the gambit. Let's jump into it. Kyle, man, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on A Gamer Looks at 40. We're going to talk a bit about Final Fantasy. And from what I understand, you're a huge fan. But before we get into the questions and the interview itself, I'd love to hear a bit about yourself, kind of, some of your history with Final Fantasy and gaming in general, and just kind of get a feel for you.
Yeah, so my name's Kyle, currently doing episodes on the RPG Show, as well as games my mom found with Mike. First time on this one, so pretty excited to be here. Been a huge Final Fantasy fan for a really long time, probably since like 1991, honestly. Not just 40 yet, I'm only 37, but definitely up there. So played a lot of them over the years, and yeah, excited to get on and kind of talk about some of my favorites and how they molded my gaming career, I suppose, along the way.
Yeah. Right on, man. Absolutely. Very cool. And what do you do on the RPG Show?
Sure. So we just cover RPGs, mostly JRPGs, all sorts, different varieties, anything from, Chrysalis all the way to Final Fantasy 16.
My son, he's 7. I had Legos as a kid. I was Mr. Build the model to the spec in the instruction booklet. Build the model to the instruction booklet. Do not stray. My son, I will give him a Batman Lego set. Within an hour, it's combined with all his other Legos and all the other sets. And I panic in my heart. I'm like, Will, you're gonna lose the piece. That he doesn't care. He likes to just make his own thing. I think that's the kind of brain that that attracts, you know what I mean? Who wants to like get into the elemental pieces of these systems and just break them apart. And it sounds like Tactics was just, and especially given your D&D experience, it sounds like a natural extension.
Yeah, that was really it. Like, and I played Tactics before I played D&D without realizing that a lot of these games that I played were basically just visual D&D. So it was just it was a really easy transition once I got into it. And yeah, I think I've been DMing for 20 years now almost.
Nice. And you still do it? Still DM?
Yeah, actually, so I'm one of those unicorns. I've got a group that's been playing together for probably 16 years, once a week.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That sounds awesome. Yeah. Once a week. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we've moved a couple times, changed people, but yeah, we play. We're on a 7.5-year campaign right now.
What is going on here? That's so cool. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's cool. Do you do it over Zoom now, or are they still local people, like local friends you meet up with in person?
Yeah, it's local. I'm currently on hiatus because we just had our second son about 2.5 months ago. But yeah, they're still going. They're still playing. Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm going to put a little footnote. It's not video game related, but that is fascinating. That is so cool. I love that. That is awesome. I want to go now. I'm going to, after this conversation, I won't do it now, but I will later. I'm going to look up Omega Monkey on GameFAQs because that is an OG username. Definitely an OG username. There's no number. It's not Omega Monkey 87257. That's pretty awesome. And GameFAQs for me is a wonderful little, I almost said graveyard, but it's not because it's still pretty active. It's a wonderful like time capsule, I think, of like reviews, and I don't know. I kind of love GameFAQs as an entity. So I am going to do a little cyber stalking. I hope you don't mind. To see if
that's fine. I'm pretty sure there's an underscore in the middle. Don't quote me on it. I haven't logged on in probably 15 years.
I love it. That's so good. I love that. Were you involved in like message boards and stuff too at that time? It sounds like it.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was kind of my introduction to like really talking about gaming with people. Growing up, in that Midwestern area, you only have so many friends who would really be into this stuff. Everyone was, not that I didn't play, Madden and FIFA and all those other things, but there weren't a lot of people into these games. So you kind of had to search at that time to find people like that, and places like Game FAQs or different chat websites at the time were really the place to find that.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. Do you remember how the community was on that side of the world? This is going a little off center, but I promise I'll bring it back. But I always find community, especially in the early internet days, extremely fascinating because it was so new. And like you just said, it opened us up to entire worlds of people that we never had access to. Do you have any kind of cool stories of maybe people you met in those online communities, maybe friendships made, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, no one that I really kept in contact with after that time frame because, it was just difficult then. You didn't have a lot of video chat or things like that. But definitely, there was a good group of people there, one or two people that I met from Wisconsin or at least talked to. And a lot of the people there would actually do a bunch of trivia contests every so often to kind of have, a WWE trophy belt or whatever that you could brag around in your little signature for a couple of weeks until the next one popped up. So we would do a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff. And random stuff like where's the Batmobile in Final Fantasy VII? Those kind of questions. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's so good. No, I love that. That's really cool. That's great. That's cool. I love it when people make connections in games over games, because again, it's a part of the medium that people don't talk about, and kind of it's a very can be a very community experience. I don't know. That's fine. Whatever that word is. But that's really very, very, very cool. We're about 30 minutes into the show, so it is now time to talk about my wonderful, lovely, and fabulous patrons, including 2 brand new members to the A Gamer Looks at 40 family. It just so happens they're both kind of family. First off, welcome my sister, Lindsay Harney. She is signed on to the $3 fan tier. And to Mr. Joey Coro, you've heard him on a recent Tales from the Bargain Bin and some of the early episodes. He has also joined the crew as well on the $5 friend tier. Thank you to both of you. They signed up like a month ago, and Patreon stopped giving me notifications, so I'm sorry. But I guess a thank you is better late than never. They are joining amazing people like Philip Becker, Terry Kinnair, Greg Stewart of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of videos, Games with Coffee, The Let's Play Princess, BT Goebbels, Tim Knowles, formerly of The Leadist, Julian of the Stage Select podcast, Seth Sergil of the All End Network, and the one and only fabulous and ever debonair Pete Harney. If you would like to join these wonderful human beings in your financial philanthropy, then mosey on over to patreon.com/a gamer looks at 4040. Check out the tiers, and if something strikes your fancy, sign up today. Next up on the show is a man who needs no introduction because I talk about him all the time and I'm on his show all the time. And it's always a blast and it's always a good time to be hanging out with the one and only Mike Albertin of Games My Mom Found. Here are some snippets from a conversation, who knows how long ago, where we talked about gaming as an escape and how fear can be a strong, powerful motivator.
Actually, no, I have more about 8, but only once you play it. But to kind of go back just with FF7 in general, like one of my favorite characters as a kid, and I think still is, I always liked Vincent. I always thought Vincent was just badass. So
very cool. That's just a cool character. Just a cool character. And when you played it, did you do all his side stuff? And because there's a lot of like skippable stuff that.
Yeah, I did all his side. I mean, I did everything in the game. I got nice around back then as a kid. I got the gold Chocobo and all did that, obviously, with that. Like I did everything there was to do before I beat the game because fear, for one thing, where I'm like, I can't beat this game unless I do everything. So there was that too.
Were you like that as a kid? Was that kind of one of your things?
Oh God, yes. I was terrified of beating games and final bosses, so I would do everything the game had to offer, so I felt powerful enough to beat the game. It's just one of, I mean, I don't do it now, but I still, now it's more I just try to do it. But yeah, back then it was that fear too, and plus I think maybe just keep the game going too.
Yeah. Which I think is great. I think I'm just curious if it's a completionist thing or so more for you is more of a fear thing where it's like, no, I don't want to take on the final boss unless I am completely overpowered and guaranteed to lay the smack down. Interesting.
It also was a friend of mine, that the guy that I mentioned earlier that was like 14 or 15 at the time when I was 10, or maybe even older, but he was scared of games too, and so he just wouldn't finish games. I think that fear also came on to me because he was someone I looked up to because he was so much older than me.
Sure.
So I think that played a big part in it too. And probably longevity. Like, you're a kid. You only get so many games. And I mean, I got a decent amount. Like, my parents are good to me. But like, you still only get so much. Not like today where I buy Steam games all the time.
We're constantly spending money on games we'll never play. Of course we are. Fair point. Very point, man. And that's what I love about your show too, man. Because you will take that risk. You'll just be like, I'm going to do an episode on this game literally 2 people have heard of, has never released here, and we're just going to do this game.
That's part of it. I just want to play different things. Like, that's why I did Dirge, because I just wanted to play Dirge again. I missed it. I was like, I remembered this being cool, even though my life was a mess. I remembered this game being fun, and I want to replay it. So I just PS2 emulation, got it going, and played it.
Did you find those games to be an escape for you during that time?
I think so. I was also unfortunately playing Final Fantasy 11 at that time too, a little bit, which is a whole nother nightmare.
I cannot wait till later. I can't wait till we get to Final Fantasy 11. I know you have. I know you have a bunch of stories. You've shared some of that already on the show, but
I got some good ones still. But
I know.
Games were definitely escape. I mean, they were escape for me when I was a kid. They would have been escape when I first played FF7 because I was bullied as a kid because I have a scar on my lip from cleft palate, and I had a speech impediment when I was a kid. So games were always an escape. I mean, I think they still are in their own form. I mean, also now it's almost a job essentially, which I love. Yeah, because then it always has something to focus on. But
Yeah, I think nowadays, like it's more of the source of your kind of creative output as well. So, but which I think marry really well, and that's a good thing. That's a healthy relationship. Yeah, totally. I've said this a bunch of time over the last few years, but I really, truly feel very grateful that I'm surrounded by people making cool stuff. It's great. And I can genuinely say most of my friends in this space are making things I genuinely look forward to listening to or watching. Like Julian at Stage Select and Mike from Games My Mom Found and all these other podcasts and shows. But one of those people who've been consistently doing that over the years is Moses, aka the Well-Raid Mage, and his series Gamelogica. As of this recording, it launched, I think, around 3 or 4 months ago. There's a bunch of episodes out there, and I had to ask him the last time he was on about this new project and what we can expect from it. So let's give it a listen. Right on, man. So Moses, man, thank you so much for taking time to join me today to talk about the Final Fantasy series. This conversation's been a long time coming. I apologize I didn't get you in for the initial overview stuff, but I'm sure we'll probably weave that through our conversation about the different games as we go forward. But before we do anything, I want to congratulate you on Gamelogica.
Oh, hey,
I love it. It is so good. And I was talking with friend Julian last night and from Stage Select podcast, and I was commenting how cool it is to have my friends doing good work. Like doing really good stuff. And Gamelogica is awesome, man. So congratulations on that.
Hey, I appreciate it, dude. It's nice to hear from colleagues and that they appreciate it. That one's it's been a long time in the making, and it's a team effort. So there's a lot of people working really hard on it. So I'm really happy with how it turns out. Because you understand this as a creative person, because you're making it, you see all the things that need to improve, and you may not necessarily have the skill set or the know-how to improve those things. But I'm trying, and it's a exciting and terrifying thing because audiovisual is not my forte. I'm more on the wordsmithing aspect. So I can write a script in like 10 minutes, but it takes me like 2 weeks to do a 10-minute video. So
yeah,
the irony there.
No, for sure. But the stuff is coming out really good. The work is really good. It's got a great balance of humor and information and lightness. So good. I really enjoy them.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your support too. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No problem. As soon as I saw it, I was, again, it's not like, oh, it's Red's new thing. I saw it. I'm like, oh no, I have to put something behind this because this is so good. So,
well, really, it's a remarkably untapped topic too.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of people doing. Well, not a lot of people. There are some really good key creators doing this sort of thing for Final Fantasy. Coincidentally, to this podcast episode, but looking broadly at topics, I don't think too many people are exploring it. So it's really, now I'm trying to get people on board thinking along those lines. We just rolled out a subreddit trying to generate more discussion. I think will be good for everybody, regardless of, I always tell people you don't have to be religious to watch the channel. It's not about my personal beliefs necessarily. Right. It's not about your personal beliefs. It's just about beliefs, which are essentially stories, Yep,
exactly. And I think having that kind of caveat on there is really good because it opens it up to everybody. It's like it's not a religious thing. It's talking about all these different ideas and how they've wormed their way into games over the years.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, really, really good.
I appreciate it.
Next up is comedian Nate McClellan. He was all over the initial Final Fantasy episodes, and he rejoins the show to talk about an ancient service from long, long ago. Again, I'm older than you. I think I'm much older than you, which is fine. I'm always I feel like as I get older, I'm slowly becoming the oldest person in the room, no matter where I am, and I'm actually fine with it. I think it's great. I'm like, that's awesome. That's great. I feel like a wizard or something. I can talk about Netflix when they sold DVDs, and
I remember that.
You had to put the disc into the Wii to even stream.
That's right. You had to put you had to put the Netflix disc in the Wii to stream Wii content. My very quick aside, my brother was heartbroken that they stopped sending DVDs. I think it was a year ago now, because he was still taking advantage of the DVD sending service. It was probably just him. It was probably for years. Yeah.
They stopped that last year?
I think it was like last year, I want to say.
Wow, that went on longer than I thought. I thought this ended in like 2015, 2016.
No, it was like last year. I was like
really took off.
No, I think it was last year, because I remember seeing it like, the end of finally they're gonna finally stop sending DVDs. And I text my brother, I'm like, Bobby, did you hear this? And he goes, I sure did. I got an email, and he was crushed because there are still lots of like these old movies and old Criterion Collection stuff, then old foreign films that they would send via DVD that you can't get on streaming. And he would till the very, very end. I was one of the first people who started doing Netflix delivery, and I think he completed it. They have been sending Netflix DVDs to the same house, probably because he lives in the house I grew up in, for like 20 years. And he was crestfallen. He was like,
did they send him an award or anything? Like,
you know what? I should ask him. Well, Bobby, did they ever send you a plaque?
Right, because
I need to. Yeah, I need to do a side story on
Netflix. I would send that person. I'd be like, I'd want to know. I'd call him up. I'd be like, I'm so sorry to kind of pry into your personal life, but what's up, man? I want to know if the person's still using the service.
We laugh. My brother is an old soul. That's how I describe him. He's 5 years younger than I am. He's in his mid 30s, but he's like an old soul because he still uses a cable TV, the music match, the music channels on cable TV. He still listens to those while he eats dinner and such. Yeah, he puts on Music Match on the TV, and then he'll eat dinner, with whatever. While he's eating dinner, he listens to music while eating dinner, and he doesn't put on Spotify, or he puts on Music Match. And he still had DVDs sent to his house, and Blu-rays, of course, via Netflix. We always laugh and say, we wonder if he was like the only customer left, and they are just keeping it every year. They're like, all right, can we finally get rid of this DVD thing? Nope. There's this one guy in Bloomfield, New Jersey, who is still getting these old Kurosawa movies from Netflix. I don't know. We have to keep it on for this one guy. And eventually they're like, no, we have to finally go away. I always wonder if there's one there, if he was one of the true last holdouts.
I'm sure. Probably one of the few.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure not. I'm sure he wasn't patient zero, but definitely he was a dying breed for sure. Coming up next on this edition of Side Quests is the amazing duo of Geoff and Trevor of New Dad Gaming. I love these guys, and whenever we get together and start talking, the conversation always goes to dad stuff and to life stuff and to dear Lord, we are aging rapidly and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Let's jump into it.
Appreciate it, and especially your line was perfect. Like a gamer looks at 40, not 20. A gamer looks at 20. So it's just you don't have time. It is so condensed how much gaming time you have. So it's just I want to see this. I'm so excited to see the story, but I just cannot wait 2 years for it to unfold as I find the time to actually manage to get through it.
When I was 20, I had the time because I had nothing else better to do. 2 weeks ago, I drove to Dallas and back for an overnight so my son can go to a Taekwondo competition. He's 7. He's 7.
As one does.
And I'm driving him to Dallas so he can go to a Taekwondo competition that he won air quote medals at. They just gave him medals because he's 7.
Hey.
That's what I did. I got no time. I have no time to grind for these things. My wife was super. Our big purchase of the week was we got TurboTax for 20% off at Costco. Yay! That is what we do now. I don't.
Hold on. That's just the greatest thing I purchased was a Costco TurboTax.
We were stoked. We were like, yes, it's like we get this edition because taxes are coming soon. I think. I don't know. I should know.
All you have to do is like tell your kids that story over dinner, and like now you're getting into boomer territory.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's the ultimate cheat codes too, right? Your taxes for life.
So life has changed in 20 years. Again, I agree with you, Geoff. Like when I was younger, probably, yeah, grind through it. But now I'm like, listen, timers are ticking. That Doom counter, you know, in Final Fantasy 6, when you get hit Doom, it goes down. It's going. I ain't got time for all this. And finally, why not end today's episode with a clip from my conversation with the great Julian of the Stage Select podcast. And the reason I'm going to conclude with Julian is this is a segment where he thanks me for doing the show. And I struggled with whether or not I should put this in here. This is more of just like a, hey, you're doing a good job. But I think Julian really captures what this show is about and what this show is trying to do. And if you're listening this far, if you are now 49 minutes into a side quest episode that has nothing to do with anything, you're probably in the same boat. But I really like the way Julian encapsulated the point of A Gamer Looks at 40 in the midst of him saying some very nice things about me. So at the risk of being self-indulgent and self-aggrandizing, I'm going to throw this in here. Julian from Stage Select puts the purpose of A Gamer Looks at 40 into a lovely little basket.
I want to thank you for this podcast, because I have gotten to a point recently where I'm starting to realize that the history of video games is so poorly archived, and we're getting to a point now with like YouTube culture and like TikTok culture and stuff like that, where you have people who are very young who weren't there at the time, which is fine, but they don't know, and they don't take the time to research things to be able to fill that in. There are people who do the research, and I give them all the props in the world, but having this type of like oral history of people who were there, I think is so important, because, you know, I can talk about how it was when the thing came out because I was there, right? Especially from the retail capacity, where it's like I can tell you what the, you know, reaction was to this or that, and not the weird internet version of it that morphed and evolved over 20 years. I think there's value to that. So, you know, you're just doing amazing work here, and I'm glad to be a part of it in a small way. Man.
Oh man, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. This is a weird show in that it's hard to explain like in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. You know, when people say, I also do a podcast, they have certain assumptions on what it is. And it's like, well, no, I'm not, again, nothing wrong with 2 people or 3 people talking, you know, like getting friends together and talking about games. That's fine. And trust me, I like shows like that, like your show, like Stage, you know, a lot of shows that do that. I like that. But I really wanted to focus on just those personal stories because they do exist and they're not found anywhere. Yeah. At least not in this kind of format. So I appreciate that. You
actually inspired me to do, we haven't started it yet, but my idea for a Patreon series for my podcast, which is myself and my friend John Golston, who you had on for us to talk about Game Fellas, and talking about and sharing those stories. And when I pitched it to him, he said, well, I don't know if my memory is good enough to like really recount a lot of that stuff. And I said, that's exactly why we need to do it now, because like, I don't want this stuff to get lost. And I want there to be a record of it, because I think it's not, because it's not just about our personal history in retail. It's also about video game history. And I think there should be as much video game history out there as we can possibly get, because, you know, heaven knows, like a lot of the game developers sure didn't hold on to their history. So someone has to do it. Yeah.
Thank you once again for checking out this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you enjoyed this podcast, there's a whole bunch more to listen to. Tons of Final Fantasy content, tons of Legend of Zelda content, Earthbound, and everything in between. Go to A Gamer Looks at 40 to check out all of my everything. There's also a section for full series playlists in the upper part of the website. Just click on that and it'll give you playlists of all of these different series that I do. That way you can listen to the entire Legend of Zelda series in one very long go. Perfect for that transatlantic flight you may be taking at some point down the line. Thanks again to Kev and Pete Harney for their help in cutting up these interviews. Thank you to my guests for taking time out of their busy schedules to join me. And thank you for listening to A Gamer Looks at 40. And until next time, simply be kind to yourselves and each other.